What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so this is a requested video from one of my subscribers. He wanted me to do a comparison between Paul Pierce and Carmelo Anthony, just from my perspective. Of course, you guys can have different and varying opinions on this. Just want me to do my comparison of the two guys and who I think you will be better as far as building a championship team around. Well, that question, you kind of got to go with the historical evidence. Paul Pierce won a championship. Paul Pierce was able to, even though it wasn't just him, obviously, Paul Pierce went to two NBA finals. And I believe Paul Pierce appeared in at least four Eastern Conference Finals, if I'm not mistaken. At least four, maybe five, somewhere in that range. Where Carmelo never won a championship, never appeared in the Finals MVP, never appeared in the NBA Finals, excuse me. Also never won Finals MVP. I think about that. Paul Pierce did. And I think he only appeared in the conference finals once. And I think that was 2009. So look, do I think it's impossible to win a championship building a team around Carmelo? No. But I get the impression that for much of Carmelo's career, he would have been somewhat resistant to augmenting his game in the manner that it may have needed to have been augmented to fit with others. I'm not saying that he wouldn't do it, but there's a certain way that Carmelo approached the game. And I'm not saying he's out there just trying to get points. I don't believe it at all, but I think Pierce, just from observation, appeared to be more coachable than Carmelo was. Now, Carmelo did obviously alter his game toward the very end of his career to the point where I think he was underutilized by Portland and the Lakers. Quite obviously, especially with the Lakers, he was their most impactful player. You look at the plus minus, that statistic, he led the team in plus minus over LeBron James, over Russell Westbrook, over everybody. He was their most impactful and most efficient player. Paul Pierce, in my opinion, was able to change his game more readily during his peak years. Both of them played for long periods of time, but Carmelo obviously missed a whole year. I think it might have been almost 2 years. He missed the entire season. Mainly because the media, I don't know what it was, but the media just turned on the guy. It's like they just, pretty much said that his game was ancient. A guy who was, a guy who primarily was known for being a mid-range shooter. For much of Carmelo's career, he was not necessarily a great three-point shooter. He definitely improved on that part of his game the last few years when he came back from the hiatus, or the exile, I should say. But he was always a great scorer. Paul Pierce and Carmelo were great scorers, but Carmelo was a bit more aggressive with his offense. Early on in his career, Carmelo would mix it up a little bit more in the post, but as Carmelo got a little bit older, of course, Carmelo developed that sweet mid-range jumper. One of the few guys in the NBA who still excelled in that area of his game, because he took a lot of mid-range jumpers. Even though he excelled in that aspect of his game, the mid-range jumper is one of the least accurate shots to take, at least in today's NBA. So his field goal percentage kind of went. It was never through the roof. It was always around usually 44 to 46%. Same thing with Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce usually shot around 45% or so, maybe 46%. And because of that, in today's NBA, they're considered inefficient by people like Brian Windhorst and others who really don't know what they're talking about, in my opinion. Because you got to look at the era they played in. You can't compare players that played in 2005 to players that played in 2024. Their numbers, it's just irresponsible and downright ignorant to do that. Kobe Bryant, all those guys, they usually shot around 45%. Tracy McGrady shot around 43, 44, 45%. Iverson was smaller, of course, and didn't have much offensive help on his team, so he shot around 39 to 41% for his prime years, which sounds terrible today, obviously. But when you look at the fact that he was playing on defensive squads, who, most of those guys couldn't really even knock down an open 15 jumper or open 15-foot jumper on a consistent level, teams were able to load up on AI. AI had to use, AI had to pretty much utilize his quickness and his ability to separate himself from defenders to get good looks. In today's NBA, he wouldn't really have to work as hard. I mean, look, Trae Young, right now, last I checked, is shooting 43% from the floor. Dame Lillard is shooting 43% from the floor. We're shaming Iverson for shooting 42% from the floor in a defensive era. So, I mean, we got to pump our brakes here when we do that, right? Obviously, Carmelo was the more prolific scorer. He scored 28+ thousand points, and I believe he won a scoring title back in, I think it was 2012, 2013 with the New York Knicks. Paul Pierce never won a scoring title, but he was definitely a big-time scorer, and he finished with 26,397 points, which put him exactly a bucket ahead of John Havlicek. Though, because all those points didn't come with the Boston Celtics, that robbed Paul Pierce of being the all-time leading Celtics scorer. All right. Paul Pierce, I thought, was the better three-point shooter. Won a three-point contest. I think it might have been back in 2010. Paul Pierce and Carmelo, in my opinion, were not great defenders early on in their careers. Paul Pierce, I thought, put more effort into his defense, especially after the arrival of Kevin Garnett. After the arrival of Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce put a lot more effort into his defensive part of the game. He got better at that. All of them did. Ray Allen, all those guys got better. They put more effort because that's what Boston's identity became. Carmelo, I think he got a little bit better on his defense the last few years of his career, but that was always, to me, a legitimate criticism of Carmelo. That he was not a guy fixated on defense, right? Paul Pierce, you could argue, was a better leader, maybe. They both were similar size. Carmelo might have been like 6'7", 230. Paul Pierce, 6'7", 235. So they were big forwards for their eras. It's pretty big forwards. Paul Pierce wasn't exactly the most athletic guy. I would argue Carmelo was a little bit more athletic. But none of these guys was like, Dominique Wilkins. You know what I'm saying? Speaking of Dominique Wilkins, this is how you know that guys like Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith have ruined sports culture. People like Bernard King, people like Dominique Wilkins are revered by people in my generation, even younger fans. They're revered. But they never won championships. And we never held that against them because they never played on a team in their primes that could compete for a championship. But with the dumbed down, ignorant ring count culture that we have today, if you don't have a championship, somehow your career is a failure. Somehow Carmelo Anthony's career is a failure because he didn't win a championship. You know what I'm saying? Somehow, because Paul Pierce only won one title, his career is a disappointment. What are we doing in sports today? What are we doing? Hell, Adrian Dantley didn't play in any meaningful playoff games until he joined the Pistons, which of course came when, at that stage of his career, he was no longer a solo act. He was around a meaningful team that had better components, and, he still served his role as a scorer, but they didn't need him to drop 30 points a night. Same thing happened with Paul Pierce. Once his team got better, he didn't have to drop 26, 27, 28 points a night. He could drop 21, 22, or 20. What they needed him for were moments. They needed him for key moments. That's when Paul Pierce did what he did. I mean, Paul Pierce has, 7 career buzzer beaters? So the man was a big-time player. And I think he gets a bit underrated. Same thing with Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony, if I'm not mistaken, for a stretch in the NBA at least, he was the best player in the NBA as far as clutch time, as far as percentage. So these guys both get, I think, bad raps. So let's look at Carmelo Anthony's. Let's look at Carmelo's. Let's look at his career. So Carmelo was listed as 6'7", 238 out of Syracuse. Of course, won a championship with Syracuse, which gets forgotten a lot back in 2003. He was the 3rd overall pick in the first round by the Denver Nuggets. To this day, we still don't understand why the hell Joe Dumars picked Darko Milicic over Carmelo. It has no. I don't give a damn how good his workout was. That's always made a lot of us suspicious that the NBA, on some level, might be rigged. And, my theory is that, because if you remember watching the sport at that time, they were trying to market LeBron as Magic Johnson and Carmelo like Bird of their generation. So it would make sense to not put them in the same damn conference and have them in opposing conferences so that in the future, they were marketing that these guys are going to be the Bird and Magic of their generation if you were around back then. But a lot of LeBron fans, they don't know about all that stuff. Oh, Carmelo ain't on LeBron level. You hating, man. You hating. For his career, Carmelo played with the Denver Nuggets for 8 seasons. And then for about 6 seasons or so, he played with the New York Knicks. Maybe 5.5 seasons, played with the New York Knicks. Excuse me. Played 1 year with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Played, I think, less than a year with the Houston Rockets. Was out of basketball for an entire season. Played with the Portland Trail Blazers for 2 years. And played 1 last year with the Los Angeles Lakers. 10-time NBA All-Star. Twice on the All-NBA second team. 4 times All-NBA third team. Led the NBA scoring, as I said, 2012, 2013. Was on the All-Rookie first team in 2004. Many of us feel as though he should have won Rookie of the Year because Carmelo led his team to the playoffs his rookie year. His team won, I believe, more games than LeBron's team did in his rookie year. And he did it in a more competitive conference. But they gave it to LeBron James. Carmelo won the NBA Social Justice Championship Award in 2021. He was named to the 75th anniversary team back in 2022. And as I said, he was the NCAA champion in 2003. NCAA Final Four Most Outstanding Player that same year. Consensus Second Team All-American that same year. USBWA National Freshman of the Year that same year. Number 15 retired by Syracuse. Two-time U.S. Basketball Male Athlete of the Year, 2006 and 2016. First Team Parade All-American 2002. And a McDonald's All-American in 2002. 28,289 points for 22.5 points per game average. 7,808 rebounds, or 6.2 boards per game. And 3,422 assists, or 2.7 assists per game. That was a part of his game also that was never the strongest, Carmelo's facilitating or passing ability. Although, I think he got better, but, you would never mistake him for, Magic Johnson. Carmelo, to be honest with you, though, I think is very understated and underrated when it comes to his Olympic career. He won Olympic gold in Beijing, Olympic gold in London. Matter of fact, I believe Carmelo was one of their best players, if not their best player in London in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, right? Did he set a record in one of those games for threes? Or did he set a record at the time for most three-pointers made in a tourney, Olympic tourney or something? Olympic gold in Rio de Janeiro in 2016. Won the bronze in the infamous Athens team in 2004. Bronze in the World Championships in Japan in 2006. And the gold in the Americas Championship in 2007 in Las Vegas. So Carmelo Anthony has had a first ballot Hall of Fame career, no doubt about it. Let's look at Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce, 6'7", 235, so about the same size. Paul Pierce went to Kansas. He was the 10th overall pick in the first round 1998 draft. Of course, that was the draft where the season was only 50 games because of the NBA lockout. Paul Pierce spent the majority of his career, about 15 seasons with the Boston Celtics. He played 1 year with the Brooklyn Nets, 1 year with the Wizards, and then 2 seasons with Los Angeles Clippers, though I believe he signed a one-day contract with the Boston Celtics and retired as a Celtic, if I'm not mistaken. So he won the NBA championship in 2008, Finals MVP in 2008, 10-time NBA All-Star, All-NBA second team, 3-time All-NBA third team. He was on the NBA All-Rookie first team in 1999. And who the hell was Rookie of the Year in 99? Was it Vince Carter? Jameson? I forget. As I say, won the three-point contest was in 2010. 75th anniversary team, number 34 retired by the Boston Celtics. Consensus first team All-American in 98. First team All-Big 12, 98. Third team All-Big 12, 97. Twice Big 12 tournament MVP, 97, 98. Number 34 jersey retired by the Kansas City Jayhawks. Was a McDonald's All-American in 95. Second team Parade All-American in 95. California Mr. Basketball in 1995. Scored 26,397 points for a 19.7 point per game average. 7,526 rebounds, 527 rebounds for a 5.6 average. And dished out 4,708 assists for a 3.5 assists per game average. They were both good free throw shooters, usually around 77 to 80% or so. I think Pierce had a little bit more of a penchant getting to the foul line when he was in his prime. Pierce was known for being what I would call a primetime performer. Carmelo could score. I make no mistake about it. He could score with the best of them. He holds the record, I believe, for most points scored in Madison Square Garden with 62 points. So the guy could score. But Pierce, I remember him more being a guy who scored in the clutch on the prime time scoring, fourth quarter scoring. That's what Paul Pierce really excelled at. You know what I'm saying? Like, he might score 4 points in the first quarter, 6 points in the second, 3 points in the third, and you're looking and you see, man, he only has 13 or so points. But then in the fourth quarter, he goes off and drops 14. He dominates the fourth quarter. Either the team wins Boston or they lose in a close game. You know what I mean? I'm talking about the years when he was like almost a solo act. Because Antoine Walker, whatever. So look, to me, man, it's close. But I would have to put Paul Pierce because of the championship, the final MVPs, the two final performances, two final appearances. Let's check something out here. Carmelo 44.7% from the floor for his career, 35.5% from the three-point range, 81.4% from the charity line, effective field goal percentage of 48.5, a 19.5 career PER rating, which is close to what I would call an all-star status mark of 20, 108.5 career win shares. Carmelo appeared in 83 playoff appearances, 83 appearances, 23 points per game, 6.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 41% shooting, 32% from downtown, 83% from the charity stripe. So look, I mean that's a Hall of Fame career. I mean, obviously. Paul Pierce, 44.5% from the floor, 36.8% from three-point range, 80.6% from the free throw line, an effective field goal percentage of 50%, so a little bit higher. PR rating about the same, 19.7, 150 win share. Now you could argue, well, Paul Pierce got to play with Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. Yes, he did, but that's not Paul Pierce's fault. Paul Pierce appeared in 170 playoff games, 18.7 points, 5.8 rebounds, 3.4 assists, 42% shooting, 36% from downtown, 83% from the foul. I got to go with Paul Pierce, man. I just think he was a little bit more consistent. He just had more moments. The playoffs mattered to me, man. The playoffs mattered to me. Carmelo had some great playoff moments, but he also had some bad playoff moments. And I'm not saying that the guy should have won a championship, but I have to go with Paul Pierce for having a better career. I think Paul I think he just had a better career, man. You know what I'm saying? Let me check out one little stat before I end this video. I want to see Carmelo so I can pull it up. So Carmelo had a 53.7% career win percentage, which is not on par with the top 10 players, like those top guys who generally won 60% or more of their overall games. So that's 53.7%. Now, granted, Carmelo did play in a much more competitive Western Conference compared to Paul Pierce. But Paul Pierce played on some very weak-ass Celtics teams the first half of his career. Terrible Celtics teams. So that should even things out a bit. Paul Pierce won 56.4% of his games, So Paul Pierce has a little bit of advantage. I'm gonna give it to Paul Pierce, y'all. Paul Pierce. But tell me what you guys think.